What is the difference between AM and FM radio? Let's find out. As many of you know, AM and FM are two different types of what we call modulation. Another word for this is change. Both AM and FM are forms of modulation used to describe the waves that radios can receive, and that the radio emitting towers that emit a signal. They also send it using a form of modulation, which gets received by the radio and then it is turned into something you then hear as noise, usually talking, music, etc. However, AM and FM have their key differences that make them different, so it is important to remember that when thinking of AM or FM radio. First, let's look at amplitude modulation, AM. This form of modulation works by varying the amplitude of the carrier wave. The carrier wave is a radio wave of a specific frequency that's used to carry an audio signal. Not to mention that AM radio signals are varied in proportion to the amplitude of the audio signal, which means that the louder the audio signal, the greater the amplitude of the carrier wave. AM radio is one of the oldest forms of broadcasting. It was the dominant form for many years until FM radio came along, which leads us to now look at frequency modulation, FM. This form of modulation does not go by the amplitude, as you may have guessed, but rather, it goes by the frequency of the carrier wave. This is why FM radio has far less interference and noise issues than AM radio, but not only that, the signal is transmitted by varying the frequency of the carrier wave. You may also know that both AM and FM radio have different frequencies, often listed between a certain range on many radios. AM often ranges from 500 kHz to 1017 kHz. Meanwhile, FM ranges from 87.0 MHz to 108.0 MHz, so this gives you an idea of what ranges of stations would be in between on both bands, but that also depends on many other factors, including the geolocation of the person with the radio, how far away from a radio tower they are, etc. However, most households are built in cities or towns where radio towers are nearby, so you can often receive signals even in your own home. However, going outdoors is always recommended to improve reception, especially if your radio does not have a good quality receiver or antenna. AM radio signals also travel further than FM signals, thus why remote and rural regions have it as a main source of news, talk, emergency broadcasts, etc. However, this also means you will be dealing with a lot of noise and interference, especially if elliptical objects are nearby. These can be smartphones, PCs, or anything that will interfere with AM radio due to its electromagnetic signal. Any electromagnetic signal will be picked up on AM radio, due to the nature of how amplitude modulation works, right? And because of that, you will be very prone to picking up noise. Thus why a lot of people recommend moving your radio away from electrical obstacles if noise and interference are affecting it, and why going outdoors helps get much better reception, at least in most cases. However, FM radio is not prone to these problems anywhere near as much, due to the nature of how frequency modulation works. So if you experience issues on FM, then maybe your radio's hardware could be the problem. Or you might be in a location where FM signals are almost non-existent, in which case you can only listen to AM radio unless you find a way to access FM. Usually, this is done by using a radio app. However, this requires internet access, and rural regions of countries might not have very good internet, so a radio is often still a big way for many people in many countries around the world consume information, music, etc. This is why it's also important to educate them on how radio works, what we use it for, why we use it, etc. Alrighty, that's it for this video folks. Remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in my next video. Bye for now.